Hi guys, welcome to tonight's Facebook live stream from Drayton. Hope your working week is going well. It's going to be a bit of a quick one tonight because there's not a huge amount of stuff going on. We're sort of very much into the quiet season now. But just a few things that keep coming up surrounding flow direction and understanding why. Well, firstly, to look for on our products that that carry water around the system, to look to see if there is a flow direction arrow, and then why it's important that we need to respect it. So really, it comes down to sort of motorised valves and also our TRVs. So I'm going to kick off by looking at the motorised valve bodies. Now, obviously, we do these in 22 and 28 mil, and remember the key with ours is the detachable actuator, but we're not particularly interested in that tonight. It's more the flow direction through the body. Now, the first thing to note is the bodies are labelled as A and B. So you can see here on the casting, you've got port A and you've got port B. Now, the rule is, this is obviously a two-port body, so the rule is in on A and out on B. So that's fairly self-explanatory when you look at the bodies, because you've got A and B. Now, where you can get a little bit confused is when you sit the actuator on top of the body, we've also got an A and B in terms of the actuator opening. Now, where the issue comes is the A and B that's on the actuator is diametrically opposed to the body. So port A being here, now this is not port A, this is actually port B. So it's important that when you're piping these up, you're not looking at the A and B on the actuator, you're looking at the ports on the bottom, or just remember that they are diametrically opposed. So if this is A over here, this is port A, and B, this is port B. Now, why is that important? Well, inside the motorised valve is one of these, which is a shaped paddle. So that's the spindle that you can see that sticks out the top of there. So that's your spindle that the actuator actually drives. But down inside the body is one of these. So you've got a couple of O-rings there to seal it where it goes through the body. But essentially what we're doing with the actuator is we are spinning this shaped paddle inside the valve body. Now, on a two-port body, it's either hard up against the seat, in which case it's sealing, so that's your valve closed position, or position A on the actuator. And when you drive it over to position B, you're just moving it over and you're permitting flow through the valve body. So you don't get a huge amount of turn on these because you're only swinging them from hard on the valve seat to open. Now, and if you've got a three-port body, one of these, it's even less, because instead of swinging from a valve seat into a wide open space, you're swinging between two separate valve seats, one for hot water and one for central heating. So that's what's going on inside of the two-port. The reason why you need to get the flow direction right is because you want the flow of the system to assist the valve opening. So when it comes in on A and there is a call for heat and the valve starts to open, you want the flow to assist the synchronous motor in opening the valve and moving it over to the open position. And then you want, when the call for heat stops, the springs inside the actuator, you've got two springs that will pull the valve back to the closed position. You want the flow to cushion that onto the valve seat. Now, the problem is if you pipe them around the wrong way, you're going to get flow through the system, because ultimately we're either opening or shutting the valve. But if you get them in the wrong way, if you pipe in on B, you've got the motor fighting against the flow in the system when it's opening, but you've got the flow assisting the valve to shut. And what that normally results in is the paddle can slam and bounce on the valve seat, so you get a bit of noise on the system. So it doesn't actually affect its operation, other than it's going to be noisy for the customer, because every time the valve closes, instead of being cushioned by the flow, the springs are pushing back against the springs are trying to pull back against the flow, and that cushioning the paddle onto the valve seat, you're going to have the flow pushing against the paddle, and it will just hit the valve seat and it will just bounce, and that will give you some noise in the system. So that's for a two-port. The three-port, and I'm sure I've probably told you this before, But the 3-port body is essentially a 2-port body with the blank taken out at the bottom and a port put in. So this bit here is exactly the same. It's just the fact we've now got access to the bottom of the body. So again, we've got ports A and B that will go off to your central heating and hot water. And the way that you feed these is you feed up the leg of the T. So this is going to be your input from your pump or boiler and pump. And then you're going to go off to ports A and B, which are going to be your central heating and hot water. So again, to find out which one's which, if we pop the actuator on top, not that actuator, because that's a 2-port. If we pop the 3-port actuator on top, they will be diametrically opposed. So when you look at it, this way round, your port B, when you've got your actuator sat on there, you're going to have your W here on the actuator, but this is going to be your water port. Your H position will be your central heating, that will be over here. So those will be diametrically opposed as they were with the 2-port. And then for mid position, obviously it doesn't matter because all it's going to do is it's going to hold it in the mid position. But the thing to remember with these is if you think that these are seized, there's not a huge amount of movement. You can see I'm going from sort of square on there. There's not a huge amount of movement. And if you get a pair of grips on here or some adjustable wrench and you try and free it up, it's quite easy to shear because let me get this end shot. You've got a weak point here, which is where your diameter goes down. So invariably, if you start putting excessive force on here, you will shear at that point there. Seems to be a bit of connection issue going on here, so I'm not entirely sure if you're getting me, but I'm going to persevere regardless. So that's really it with motorized valves. So it's important to get the flow direction right, just because if you don't, they're noisy. And this is a theme that you will see. Most of our valves is that if you get the flow direction wrong, they will be noisy. Firstly, you won't get enough flow through, but they'll be noisy. So moving on to TRVs. So 15mm angled body. Everybody knows this one. This is our EB body. This comes with the TRV4. It also comes with the RT414. This is the one that you can change the gland seal out on, and you can also do the balancing by turning the valve insert and reduce the aperture size. This is this one and the body that comes with the RT212. These are the only ones that are bidirectional, so they've got the double-headed arrow. So the new 15mm angled auto balancing valve is not bidirectional, it's unidirectional, meaning the flow can only go in one direction, which is why it's critical that you get the flow direction right when you fit it, otherwise noisy. You'll get a lot of noise on the system, particularly with the auto balancing, because we are really throttling them down. It's got high valve authority. We're really restricting the flow into the radiator, so it's important that you get them the right way around. So what does bidirectional actually, well, it mean? Bidirectional just means that you can feed up the leg from the tail and go into the radiator, or if you want to have your valve this way, you can do it exactly the same way because you're not affecting the flow depending on which way you're going. You can go either way. Now, the straights that we've got, they are all, if we have a look at the straight body here, you can see that's got a single-headed arrow, so we've got to flow from in there and out on there. And you can just see from the way the ports are arranged, you've got a big wide open port there, that's on the inlet, and then to give the valve authority, you've got a very small port just up in there. So you can see if you try to flow in the wrong direction, you're going to start having issues. You're going to start hearing the flow through the body. This, incidentally, is one of our auto balancing TRVs that's straight. We also get a lot of questions on these, which are corner angle bodies. So the idea with these is they allow you to have your head in the vertical position, but if your pipework is feeding out from the wall. So quite common with microbore this. We do them in 15mm. That doesn't mean you can't adapt them down to 10 or 8. But we do corner angle valves, but they come in corner angle right and corner angle left. And you can see they've got a single-headed arrow on there. So they are, there is a flow direction. Now, depending on with which one do you need? Corner angle right or corner angle left? Well, you'll need two of the same, because we don't do a corner angled lock shield. So what we do if you want for a lock shield is you have the same valve on the other side, but you can put one of the chrome caps on it or a manual wheel head and just not throttle it all the way down, and you would do your balancing then on the corner angle body itself. So that's how this sort of system architecture would work. You're not reliant on the lock shield to balance. You're going to be balancing using the insert that you can turn here, and you've got 6 positions that will impact the aperture size on the outlet. But you will need 2 of the same, because if your flow is coming in on the left and turning into the radiator, that's a corner angle right. And if it's going out of the radiator and back into the wall, that's also a corner angle right. So you will need 2 of the same. Similarly, if you would need a corner angle left, if your flow is coming in on the right hand side, out of the wall into the radiator, that would be a corner angle left. It then needs to leave the radiator, go back into the wall, it's another corner angle left. So if you put a left and right, you'll sort of hold the flow in the radiator and it won't go anywhere. So which one you need will be dependent on which side of the radiator your flow and return is. But whichever one you need, whether it is corner angle right or corner angle left, you will need 2 of them. One will have the thermostatic head on, and you will set using the presetting key your balance by turning the insert. And on the other end, you will have, normally, I mean this is quite common for, say, tower rails, so you will have the chrome version of the decorator cap. You'll screw it on just until you feel the pin hit the top of the cap and leave it like that. So you don't want to wind it all the way down, again, otherwise you're going to stop flow going in. So auto balancing valves, touched on these a little bit earlier. So just to give you a refresh, the whole point of these, again, we're reducing an aperture size in order to manage flow into a radiator. When we do it with the EB body, or when we do it with the lock shield, we are setting a fixed aperture size regardless of whatever happens on the system. So let's just wait for the connection. There we go. What you can really say about that is that you're only really in balance at one point in the system cycle now, and that's the point where you were doing probably your differential temperatures across the radiator. So the important thing with these is when you set the flow rate on the top of these, which you set using your 11mm spanner or the tool, you can set anything up to 150 litres per hour. Now, the way you will work this out is you can use the box. So on the inside flap of the box, you have got a chart which will tell you your setting position. Now, the flow, what the positions actually mean, it's 10 times flow. So if you're looking at position 3, that's actually 30 litres per hour. So your increments on here go from 1 to 15, 1 being 10 litres per hour, the other 15 being 150 litres per hour. So what you will do is you will cross-check your radiator size, and you will choose what differential you want across the radiator. Now, industry standard for a gas boiler tends to be 20. You don't have to run it at 20, you can choose 10 or 15. Or you can do the long-winded calculation using mass flow rate, and you can find out, you can be a bit more detailed with it that way. But we give you the 3 choices. If you were using, say, a heat pump, you're not going to have a delta T of 20. You're more likely to have a design delta T of 5, which typically isn't really that achievable, more likely in reality to be 10, but you're not going to be fitting these auto balancing TRBs to a heat pump, because the aperture, the throttling is just too much. So we do have a solution, but it's not auto balancing. You can use the EB body, or you can use the fixed flow rate body that comes with the RT212 if you're fitting it to a heat pump, but not the auto balancing. But you can see there you get 3 options. Let me show you that again. You get 3 options as to what, whether you want a delta T of 10, 10, 15 or 20. And when I talk about delta T, that is differential between the flow and return. Now you will see a lot of radiator manufacturers talk about delta T's of 50. What they are talking about there is the difference between the flow temperature and the ambient room temperature. So if you've got 70 degrees in your flow temperature and you've got 20 degrees in the room, that's a delta T of 50. we're not talking about differential between room and flow. We are talking about difference between flow and return. So gas boiler typically is going to be 20-degree differential. Now obviously the delta T for a radiator is going to, whether you have 20 or 15 or 10, that is going to affect the output of the radiator, as is the actual flow temperature that you've got. And what you'll find is a lot of radiator manufacturers will state their given output. So if it's a kilowatt radiator or a 2 kilowatt radiator, what they don't tell you explicitly, you can find it in the instructions, but it's 2 kilowatts or kilowatt or 700 watts or whatever at 75-degree flow temperature. Now, we're trying to move away from that because we want to try and make sure that the boiler is condensing most of the time. So there is a move towards 55-degree flow temperature. Now, obviously, this doesn't work for all situations. It's fine with a combi boiler because your hot water is doing itself. It's on demand. You're not storing hot water. We've got to be careful with dropping flow temperatures to 55 degrees if we're storing hot water, because obviously there is a big risk there of Legionella. So if it's somebody that's vulnerable or young children, you can't afford to be dropping your flow temperature, or at least not having some sort of Legionella prevention by having maybe a daily cycle where it takes it over 65 degrees. But you've got that option. Now, when you look at the radiators, the flow temperature and the delta T will have an impact about what that radiator's output is. So when we look at the box and we're picking an output, we are not just taking the face value of the radiator, or just bought this, it says it's 2 kilowatts on the label. We are taking into consideration our design flow temperature in the system as well. So if it's going to be 55 degrees, your 2 kilowatt radiator is not going to be giving you 2 kilowatts. It's going to be proportionally lower based on the manufacturer's instructions. So you can look up and see what they are, and they normally give you a graph that shows you flow temperature versus heat output, and then you can see, oh, I'm running, say, 55 degrees. And this is sort of where things go a little bit awry with heat pumps, and why you end up having a lot of times to oversize radiators for your heat pumps, is because heat pump might have 35-degree flow temperature. So, a face value 1 kilowatt radiator at 75 degrees isn't going to give you anywhere near that if you start pushing 35-degree flow temperatures through. So when you're looking at the box and you're picking your output, it is based on your radiator output at the flow temperature that you're going to be running. Now, the easy way around that is, well, the easiest way is to use our calculator. So if you head over to the Drayton Controls website and you go into TRVs and pick Auto Balancing TRV, there is an online calculator. The reason it makes it easy is it asks you for the flow temperature. So you can put in there what your design flow temperature is, and it will take that into account when it's looking at the size of the radiator, type of the radiator, and it will tell you what setting you need to set it at, how many litres per hour for that particular radiator or for that particular output, and then you can simply set your flow rate on the top of the valve, pop the head on, and the system is in balance. Your lock shield, remember, is going to be left wide open because we don't want any further throttling. So the whole point really of our controls and TRVs in general is you're trying to restrict flow into the radiator, because we don't want it just to race through the radiator and go back on the return and get the return temperature up above dew point at 54 degrees. We want to be making sure that our flow temperature is, by the time it gets back to the return, if we do go out of condensing mode, there will be something to trigger it to turn it off. So it may be modern boilers will start to modulate down. In any case, really we want our electronic controls to kick in at that point to turn to say there is no more demand. But if we can keep the flow temperature low, it means the return temperature is always going to be low. So that means we're going to be in condensing mode more often, and that's really where our boiler efficiency goes up. Slightly different theory with heat pumps, because obviously lower flow temperatures, so you want more flow through the radiators. So whereas we've waiting for the connection, if we've got say 65-degree water, coming out of the boiler going through the radiator. We want to hold that in the radiator for longer so that we can emit it into the room, because there's a lot of heat energy there that we want to get out. You know, we're looking at a delta T of say 20, so we're trying to lose 20 degrees across that radiator. So we want to hold that water in there to give it a chance to emit that those 20 degrees. If we look at a heat pump where we've got a delta T of 5, if we've got 35-degree water entering, 30-degree water going back, we need that to race through. We don't want. There's no point in holding on to that in that radiator, because it's not going to take it long to emit those 5 degrees. So we need more flow rate, which is why you wouldn't be using auto balancing with a heat pump, but absolutely fine for all other sources. But we do have a solution. But the main thing I'm talking about here in terms of flow direction is all of the auto balancing, whether it's 15mm, angled or straight, they're going to have a fixed flow direction arrow, which you have to respect. Let me see if I've got. There we go. There's the 15mm angled equivalent. Everybody is so used to an angled body being bidirectional, but these can't be because of what's going on inside of them. So what does that mean? Well, it means that when you come to fit them, you can't. If you're retrofitting, you can't just look at a radiator, see that the existing TRV is on the left-hand side, and blindly replace it with that on the left-hand side. You need to first establish, is that the flow? If it is the flow, then you can fit the body in that direction, so the flow will come out of the floor and go into the radiator. If it's not the flow, if it's the return, you can still fit the TRV on that side, but you're going to have to rotate it, and you're going to have the head sitting horizontally so that it's coming out of the radiator, respecting the flow direction arrow, and then going back down in the floor. Or you swap it with the other end. So if you've got plenty of room either side, then swap the lock shield, put the lock shield on the return, and put this on the flow. That means you can have your head conventionally as we like it in the upright position. But if it's tight, if there's some reason why you can't get that lock shield off, it doesn't stop you fitting this if it's on the return, but it must roll over and fit that way. Otherwise, you risk noise. And because the throttling in these is so, we can modulate that aperture down really small, you will start to get noise if you try and backfeed them, essentially. Try and run the flow against the flow direction arrow. Right, I'm going to give you the warning now for questions, because I'm sort of coming to the end of this now. I was going to take you through the mass flow rate calculation, but I'm not actually able to share my screen at the moment. So what I'll do is I'll stick that up as a little side to that. There will be a video coming out soon as well, which talk about the principles of auto balancing. So I've done a lot about, you know, where to use them, why you would use them, but up until now it's just been me telling you, yeah, they're really good, fit them, and they do this. I'm going to start backing up with a bit of science. So we are going to look at mass flow calculation. We're going to look again at what I talked about, where don't take a radiator at face value, and really just give you the sort of ability to be able to calculate what the flow is. And when you look at the chart like this, and it says that, you know, a 700 watt radiator needs to have 30 litres per hour in order to fill that, where that has actually come from. Right, let's have a quick look and see if there are any questions. Not seeing. Oh, there is a question actually. It's not come in now. It came in the other day by the looks of it. Come in on one of our socials, just asking about range limiting. So reasonably topical because we're doing TRVs. So asking, can you range limit these? Well, there's a couple of ways of range limiting these. It depends whether you're happy for people to have any sort of control whatsoever. So you can range limit them up to a certain value, or you can range limit them so they can't go below a certain value, or whether you're happy with people having access to the locking ring, because obviously if you're putting these in a communal area, you can range limit them by stopping the head turning, but there's nothing actually stopping somebody from undoing the locking ring, maybe even stealing the head. So for that solution, you would have a tamper guard. So we do a pack of 6 tamper guards that fit over the whole of the head. So they're range limited in so much as nobody can actually get to the knob, so they can't turn it. So that's sort of a fairly brute force way of range limiting. The other way you'd range limit these is with the pins underneath. Now you can see here. Let me grab a little something that I can just point with, because it's going to be quite fine. So under here you've got the you can see there's a couple of pins there, and then we've got this series of holes around the perimeter. Now one of those pins, this may not come out terribly well on camera, but one of those pins, in fact it's the left hand one, you can see that's quite flush, and the other one, the right hand one, is actually protrudes. So the one that's flush is the one that's holding it all together. So you don't remove that one, because if you take that one out, it allows you to unscrew the head completely and it comes away from the bezel. So don't be going near that one. And also they are, without the proper tooling, they are a proper pain to try and get out. But the one that's sort of half in, or 3/4 in, that one, you can pull that one out, and then depending on where your head is set to at any particular time, you can then remove it from that hole and pop it into one of the others. So if you wanted to say range limit at position 3, meaning position 3 is the maximum that you want somebody to be able to get to, you would start with a head set to minimum. You would extract the right hand pin, and then you would reinsert it into position 3, and that will mean that when you try and turn the knob, it's only going to go to position 3. It's not going to go any further. So position 3, about sort of 18 to 21 degrees. You get about a 3-degree swing on these. So that's about what position 3 is. Now, if you're going to fit these in a care home or somewhere where the temperature is critical, that you don't go below a certain value, you can go the other way. So if you start in the maximum position and extract that right hand pin and then put it in position 3, what that will do is it will stop it going down below position 3. Now, if you want to actually lock it in position 3, you can get hold of another of these pins. Now, that's something that you can talk to our customer service with, or some of our merchants will stock them, but I'm sure if you don't need a huge amount, our customer services will be able to help you. You can pin either side. So you would put a pin in 3 and 4, and that would mean that the head is locked between 3. Actually, I'm just being told we've actually got these pins on our priority shop. So yet another reason why you would want to be 9 Degree Network members, because you get access to the priority shop, and if you need things like extra pins to pin these up, you can get them there. Right, last sort of 20 seconds of me going on. Don't see any more questions. Thanks for joining me tonight. This will obviously go up onto the group, and you can watch it, rewatch it at your leisure. It will also find its way onto YouTube. All of our channels are monitored, and all of the videos are monitored. So if you've got a question, just reach out to us that way. We've also got the Drayton community group, so anything on there. If you've got any questions, any suggestions for future video content, anything you want to see, I'm happy to do. Keep an eye out. There are going to be some new modules going up on know-how, looking at control pack wiring and fault finding. And we are also in the process of reworking the WISER modules, because there's been some developments with underfloor heating and just a better understanding of what your requirements are. So keep an eye out for those. That just leaves me to say thanks for joining me tonight, guys. Always a pleasure, and I will catch you on the next one. Apologies for the connection issues we've had as well. I think we need to have a chat with somebody in IT. Cheers, guys. Catch you soon.